We're now back in Fusion where we left off, and I now want to import my 3D render and merge it on top of my clean plate. So I'm just going to move all this a little bit to the side. And then let's import our EXR file. Let's also add this into our loader section. And so if we preview this, so you see here we have our render. And as you might remember, we've rendered this in a lower resolution. Now I'm just going to keep it that way. You can also render it in full resolution. So it's the same resolution as our original footage. But for now, I'm just going to resize this. And then let's just put this also to the same resolution. So like that. And we also want, of course, so you can see we see our geometry, I mean our projection, but we have it in our alpha channel that can get removed. So in our loader, we just have to make sure that we post multiply by alpha. Now we can just go from here and merge it on top of our clean plate, and it has to be before we corner position it. So we'll have to change this a little bit. This can be more to the side. And then let's merge this onto that. So if I now preview the merge, you see we have our clean plate, we have our 3D object on top, that then gets corner positioned from our track data. We then merge that on top of our original footage, and then as a last step here, we get our keyed out character that then moves in front of our 3D object. Upon closer inspection, so if we really zoom in, you can see that there is a little difference here between the key that is added on top and then this background image that we have here. Now I've looked a bit around, and what I've actually found out is that there is still some trace alpha in our render. If you see, if I hover here over our image, you see that we have some trace alpha and color values here. So if you also just add the gamma here, you can see we get some values in there. So maybe you want to get rid of that so we don't get this disconnect between the two. And we can do that by just adding, for example, so we're not going to post multiply the alpha here already. So let's just uncheck that. And I'm just going to get a brightness contrast tool and just put it on the alpha channel. And then just, if we preview this in the alpha channel, and then just raise the gamma so we see where our values are. And then just raise this low until we don't get the most of those trace values are gone then. So let's maybe 0.05, and then it seems like most of them are gone. So now we have a negative alpha in those areas, but we can then just clip the black. If we then look at the difference here, there's a slight difference, but it's not going to be noticeable for our case. So then after the brightness contrast tool, we can of course multiply. So alpha multiply like that. And then we do our resize to 4K. And then merge it. And so then you can see that if we go back to our end node here, you see that we don't get that. So let me undo this brightness contrast tool here, or just switch. So if I disable this, you see that we have this clear line here, and with that enabled, we get rid of that. So that's what we want. Let's now add a few more things in our comp. So if we go more to the beginning of our sequence, and I will enable the proxy again, so it calculates a little bit faster. And we go to the first few frames. So as you can see on these first few frames, the tracking is not correct. Now I tried to get it in there, but yeah, I didn't have enough time to keep working on that. So what I decided to do is, because we have a lot more resolution than we need for the delivery format, we can actually get rid of these first few frames and just see like, okay, from where on is the track working, and it's from this frame 261. So we want to cut off actually this part of the frame so that it's never in view actually. So let's just add a crop tool and preview it. And let's just keep it centered, and let's first just take our original resolution. And then let's just take a few pixels off. And so also make sure that the aspect is checked as well, so that we keep our original aspect ratio here. Then from here on out, we can go to our delivery format, which is going to be just normal 1080p. So we can already do a resize then, and resize it not to 1920 by 1080 because we're still in a 4K aspect ratio. So 4K is 4096 divided by 2160. And so it's an aspect ratio of 1.89, and 1080p is 1.77. So we have to then make sure that this resize, we keep the frame aspect, and then just set it back to. So then our resize node is set to 2048 by 1080, which is still that same aspect ratio of a 4096 divided by 2160. So this is the same aspect ratio, of course, because it's just divided by 2. Both of them, horizontal width and height. And then to go to a full, a standard 1080p, we still need to cut a little bit of the sides here. So we can do that again with a crop tool. And then just, this will be 1920 by 1080, and keep it centered so that it's from both sides a little bit gets cut off then. Now, one more thing before we render this out as an intermediate result. If we go a few frames forwards. So as you can see here, so this is already the tracked clean plate there, but the camera is moving here. There's also a little bit of an issue here. Maybe we can take care of that later. So if you are using this kind of corner pin track and the camera is moving, there of course needs to be motion blur on that. So in the corner positioner here, we can actually say in the Fusion tab, use motion blur. And as you can see now, it already blends much better into our original backplate. And let's just for now, let's cut this off also so that we don't need to bother with it. So I did a few more adjustments. So I cropped a little bit more of our original plate, and also I had to up the erode delete a little bit so that we don't get more of these little edges between the keyed out character and the original backplate. Another small thing that I've noticed is that there is this slight darker edge on our clean plate when we just post-multiply the alpha in the loader. So we can get rid of that by just disabling this and then putting an alpha multiply before we merge it, before we merge our 3D on top. So if I put this in between those two, so now you see that that darker edge is not there. So I'll render this out now as a little preview and then we'll wrap it up for this video. And so this is now the result of our work till now. In my preview, there's also another smaller mistake, which is this weird thing here. If I go back here, so that's because on my erode delete, the RGB channels were enabled. And so that gives us this erode delete effect on the color channels as well. So just disable those to just erode the alpha instead. So once we have disabled the red, green and blue channels, we get another kind of visual error here. In the mask tab, if you dare uncheck the red, green and blue as well, so that the mask also only applies to the alpha, we get a correct result where the alpha is still eroded a little bit so that we don't get this border here. So as you can see, this erode delete fixes that edge here, but doesn't introduce other visual inconsistencies in our image. So the next big step in our project now is to get rid of this edge here. And for that, we're going to also use masking in conjunction with the corner pin as well. But that is for the next video, so see you there.